And good morning. It's early morning. It's about 5 o'clock, 5 something, 5:30, 5:45 in the morning. So getting up, we got orientation today. So we're in Arizona. For those that don't know, I do work as a travel nurse. Uh, so we're starting our not first day of orientation. We already had classroom orientation. We're doing like the clinical. We only get 2 days worth of orientation. You get one on night, and then basically you get like one on the floor, and then it's right to work working with patients. So I've been doing this for a couple of years. It's good. You have to get used to kind of moving around if you want to maximize your pay. And so it's a good, as I said before in one of my videos, quoting what the Apostle Paul said about learning to work with your hands. For a lot of people who are moving into digital, right? If you did like editing, like much of this stuff can now be done via AI, even though AI is a useful tool. But as you're seeing with the rising of interest rates, more tech jobs, more tech layoffs. Now, it's important to understand that really America doesn't produce much. So a lot of the jobs are typically in service. But for infrastructure, well, I should say, for a lot of tech jobs, a lot of those tech jobs can be outsourced. So a lot of those people who are like, I'm not coming back to the office, the work from home people, they will be phased out because the companies realize, oh, we don't need all this office space, right? Now America doesn't know what to do with all this office space. And so they have all these people working from home. Now, the moment you realize that these people can work from home, or that your people can work anywhere from home, anywhere in the United States, they can work anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, right? And so you're not going to need these high paid American workers when you can just pay people overseas. That was one of the reasons, people warned about that. If you didn't want to work in the office, well, then you can just be replaced by somebody overseas. And so that moving forward, as things become more expensive, as America falls more into poverty, as more of manufacturing, you're seeing it now with the semiconductors. Semiconductors, of course, they're worried about China basically taking over Taiwan. And America was like, well, if China takes over Taiwan, we're going to bomb Taiwan. And Taiwan was looking at America like, we're going to defend ourselves if you try that. And this is because when that happens, America will have less opportunities in the chip war, and this will cause more poverty on the American side. This is why you're seeing them talking more about UBI or giving some sort of a stimulus money. They're just getting the people ready. And this is one of the reasons why you see a lot of people talking about we can't find employees, because a lot of people either don't want to work or are retired. The other thing to consider is that the baby boomers are like 70 million people, and they're the largest generation that is going to be retiring. So more of those people will move out of the work industry, meaning that their ability to spend will be reduced. So now you have this huge portion of the population that will be on a fixed income, right? Because now they have an active income. Some of the nurses that I work with, they're 60, 62, 63, 64, 65, and they're ready to retire. And I joke around with them and I tell them, I was like, hey, we got a nursing shortage. You guys can't retire. And they're like, I don't care. I'm retiring no matter what they say. So there's a lot of people that are going to be moving out of the labor market. And many of these jobs are typically manned. Just Google average age of an American farmer, average age of an American nurse. And you'll be surprised that the ages are pretty high. There's nobody coming in behind them. There aren't young people coming in behind them. Most of the teachers in academia for nurses are baby boomers. So now the ability to pump out more nurses, this is why I've said in one of my videos that there might not be a nurse there for you when you get older, because they just don't have the population. We don't have the infrastructure. And so this is what happens, unfortunately, as Americans become more wealthy and they dive more into socialism, where they keep asking the government for more free stuff. And eventually people don't want to work. In most of the hospitals, where I travel to, they got no kitchen staff, no nursing staff, aides, etc., right? No respiratory. because everything is short. Not just nurses, everything, even doctors. There were some places where even there's even a shortage of doctors. And this is what you're going to see moving forward. So one of the best jobs that you can find are going to be jobs where you work with your hands, whether it's plumbing, electrical, if you're doing carpentry, etc. Right? Many of these jobs, HVAC, because they'll still need people to maintain the infrastructure in America. So those jobs will be plentiful. But that isn't the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is what I've said before, that if you want a life where you want to get married and have children, you should do that abroad and not do it in America. And so if your desire is to live abroad, that's one of the most important skills that you're going to need, because infrastructure over there in East Asia or in Eastern Europe or in Latin America, the infrastructure is expanding. And so there's need for men who are willing to work with their hands. That's why you see many young black men being phased out, because they were able to pull many of this unskilled labor from the border. And so as these individuals kind of get phased out, they'll fall into poverty, or they'll end up falling into welfare or crime, etc. And so to kind of avoid that, by having the ability to save and then move abroad, and you'll be able to have a better life living abroad. Now, of course, you're going to want to have some investments, whether it's some sort of passive income. Like I use dividends. I invest a lot in dividend stocks, and then I still do hold a lot of tech stocks or more risk assets. The reason being is because then you can write covered calls, right? So that'll give you two forms of income. You'll get income from stocks. You'll get basically a set amount of income that will appreciate as time goes by, because most of these companies will raise their dividend. So it'll give you a little bit of growth in terms of the income. And then of course you'll get another set of income from being able to write calls. Then you'll have whatever your active income is. Of course, you'll want to save either for some land or to buy a home. I really don't recommend buying apartments in major cities because they're overpriced because of many Americans traveling abroad. And so if you go to places like, for example, in Colombia, and you go to Medellin, if you go like into Parque Lares or Poblado area, that's going to be very expensive. You're looking closer to like $100K for a decent apartment, maybe $150 on the higher end if you want a little bit more of a luxurious lifestyle. Whereas if you buy land outside and build a home, you'll be able to build a whole home and still have land left over if you want to do some farming and have animals, etc. It really just depends on what your goal is. Many young men go abroad because they chase women. You look at many of these different YouTubers that go abroad, it's typically what they get involved in. They tell you that they go abroad because they're looking for a relationship, they're looking for, oh, I want to have a family. And then a year goes by, 2 years go by, 3 years go by, and they've been doing this YouTube for who knows how many years, and they never end up getting married. They just jump from woman to woman to woman. And this is unfortunately what happens if you live that lifestyle. It becomes very difficult, as they say, to want to settle down and have a family, because you can just live a hedonistic lifestyle. The same lifestyle that you've lived in the States, you then bring over here under the guise of, I want a traditional woman, when you yourself are not living a traditional life, especially when it comes to being a provider. If you're going into a country that is more patriarchal, you are expected to be a provider. And of course, over here in America, that word is a 4-letter word, right? If a woman says that you're a provider, then you're a beta male, etc. But living abroad in many of these other countries, it's not westernized like how America is. And so you have to change your mindset, that idea of constantly hooking up and just jumping from woman to woman to woman. If you take that into other cultures, all you will do is pervert that culture itself. You'll bring the same problems over there to over here. And that's one of the things that you see in places like in Medellin. When I went, you see prostitution of young women is rampant. And overwhelmingly when I went, it's overwhelmingly young black men and older white men when I went there. And so I don't recommend, especially in the downtown area of Medellin. You could always go to the outer areas. It's a very beautiful, very beautiful city. If you really like the nightlife, if you're like I did, like when I went to Bogota, it's fantastic. If you're the type of person you like to go to clubs, there's a plethora of clubs to go to. I think I went to like 5 clubs my first night that I was out there, and I had a great time. I was there for like 3 weeks, and I went often. I couldn't go previously because of not having the jab, and you had to have the jab to get in. And then I think now it's just a PCR test, and hopefully they'll eventually get rid of that. I'm not sure, but in any event, wherever you choose, be congruent with what your goal is. If your goal is to go abroad because you want to have a family, because it's too risky to do it over here, especially if you earn a solid income. If you're earning 6 figures, you buy a little bit of property, all you do is expose yourself to risk dating an American woman because of the laws. It's not just because of the culture. It's not just because American women are promiscuous, and that's related to men being promiscuous, because women adapt to their environment. Women do not create their environment, they adapt to it. And so men have to take responsibility for why the women are the way they are. And so with that being said, wherever you go, you have to take that mindset with you. Not going abroad, and this is what ruins many of the women in other countries, why a lot of these countries don't like, as they say, the gringo go home, and there's plenty of people, same thing going on in Mexico, because they're taking their culture and they bring it over here, and they're perverting the country with their way of living. They're just basically spreading feminism abroad and paying women for sex. So I don't recommend getting involved in that, because it will basically ruin you. It's very difficult when you live a promiscuous lifestyle to then go back and be a monogamous individual, regardless of what people tell you. I lived that way for a very long time, unfortunately. Had grown up in the church, and then later on in my later 20s, when I left, I lived a very hedonistic lifestyle and just slept with women like crazy, especially living in Manhattan, having an apartment in a very nice area. It was easy. It was easy to just meet people at the bar and be like, oh yeah, I live down the block, and they're like, really? You live over here? Oh, you live by yourself? What do you do again? You get that sort of a conversation, and before you know it, you're taking women home left and right. But it's a very empty lifestyle. It's a very empty lifestyle, and it's a very hard lifestyle to get out of, because it becomes a habit. And just like anything that becomes a habit is difficult to break. Especially if people tell you that, oh, it's no problem for a man wanting to sleep around. Men can do it, and absolutely no problem. That is a lie. Because if you want to live a lifestyle as a husband and raising a family, it's very difficult if you've lived that sort of a lifestyle where you've jumped from woman to woman to woman. Because once one of them gets out of line, you're like, I'll just go find another one. That's not a problem. That is not conducive for building relationships and having a family. And so of course, most importantly, like I said before, if you have some passive income, one of the easier ways to do it is just by investing in the stock market via dividends. That will give you some income. It does take time. So if you're very young, let's say like if you're in your early 20s, it'll probably take you, I would say, 10 to 20 years to adequately save, unless you do it very aggressively. You're going to want to save. I would probably say like around, let's just say you save 100,000 and you're getting 6%, 5.5%, 6%, maybe 7%. That 7,000 a year, you'll still have to pay taxes on, but that will basically be able to passively pay for whatever your rent would be. Typically, rent in Colombia, if you're going to Colombia, it's going to be like around $300 on the high end to support for your cost of living. Now, if you're living in a very nice neighborhood, if you're living a high-end life, they're going to give you Western prices. So you're more than likely probably going to pay double that, and it's for an apartment. Or as I say, go look to buy some land. From there, you can have some growth stocks. So, and then let's say you invest another 100,000 into growth. Then you can write covered calls. You can write either monthly, quarterly, or however far into the distance. But if you need income every single month, then you'll have to learn how to do it every single month. At this point, because I'm still here in America, I usually write them like every quarter, or maybe even sometimes longer. If I've seen a big run up in some of the stocks, I'll write a long-term call and hold on to the cash that I get and either reinvest that into other stocks, other risk assets, which is what I've been doing for quite some time. And so that'll give you your two forms of somewhat passive income. Passive income from dividends and fairly passive income from writing covered calls. You've taken some money, let's say probably like 50,000, and you've put that towards housing. Now your housing is taken care of. You don't have to be paying rent. All you have to worry about is your gas and electric, and then your food. And your passive income will typically take care of that. Then you have to decide on how much you're going to spend towards having a family. Usually you'll probably want to dedicate at least another $150 to $200 a month if you're having a kid, obviously with a woman. And that's basically your incremental steps on how much it costs and how to go about living abroad. Obviously there are other facets like getting your passport, but once you actually get married and settle down, and at least most of your assets are abroad in America, so that protects you. It protects you because most of your income and most of your growth assets are in the American stock market. And now obviously that basically leaves it subject to taxation, but then it also doesn't allow for this country over here to basically attack your wealth that you've built up in another country. Of course, you got to pay attention to the laws. That's the most important thing, is pay attention to the laws of the land. Obviously, you can't have kids in America because if you've built up all this nice nest egg, and then she says, you know what, I want to go my own way, it becomes subject to the divorce court. So you can lose a good portion of the wealth that you've accumulated. That's why I would never recommend it. I've spent a lot of time working, and I would not want all my years of hard work to go to somebody who just decided to dip for no reason. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it here. Those are basically my thoughts. This is basically what I've been doing for the past couple of years. That I finally decided. I was kind of worried with the whole jab nonsense because a lot of countries were going their route of basically not letting you in, but we're seeing that kind of being phased out, especially as there's more competition within many of these countries. It makes it harder for the West to clamp down on their people because there's freedom over there, right? People moving to Russia, people moving to Southeast Asia, people moving to Eastern Europe, right? Because there's more freedom there. And so what happens is that it forces the powers over here to ease up on their people, where they can't clamp down like more than likely the way they want to. And so as long as there's friction in the world and you have multiple sides, it forces freedom because no one person has all the power to abuse. And so even though it's unfortunate that that's how it has to work, but when there's mutual destruction, that allows for people to be able to move around. So while that still exists, keep that in mind. While the dollar is still useful and is still valuable to other countries, use it to basically extract resources from America and go build up another country and build up wealth over there, build your infrastructure over there, and keep yourself focused and dedicated here. I don't date in America. I stopped dating in America, I want to say back in like 2016, from traveling and meeting other expats abroad. I met older men that basically told me, yeah, I would never go back to America. These were guys that were like in their 50s and 60s, when I was in my early 30s, or when I was in my later 30s, and they're like, yeah, I would never go back. Way too much. You're subject to taxation. You're subject to the divorce courts. You can lose a lot of your wealth. And they're like, I would never go back. It's fantastic over here, dating over here. The women are much more feminine, etc. Keep it in mind. Keep it in mind. Have a plan. Stick to that plan. Have a trade. That trade you can take with you to another country. You can take your ability to be a plumber or electrician, etc., right? Or you're a carpenter, HVAC. You can take all that with you. Whereas me as a nurse, I typically can't. So I'd have to do something else, or I'd have to build up more passive income or buy real estate so that I have a form of active income where I'm renting doing rental income. But if you have the ability to work with your hands and you're very skilled, you can take that with you no matter anywhere you go. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll check you next time.